Good afternoon, and welcome once again to another edition of Yoruba Historical Conversation. Here we have our guests in the midst to give us an interesting uh, conversations or insights on the topic Yoruba Igbo political history, building trust through accurate perspective. I will try to give a short citations of our guests now. Akogun Tola Adeniyi is a distinguished Nigerian journalist, writer, and media executive, known for his extensive contributions to journalism and literature. His career spanning over 6 decades, including significant roles as chairman, managing director, editor-in-chief of Daily Times of Nigeria, and editor-in-chief of the Nigerian Tribune. Akogun Tola Adeniyi is renowned for his incisive columns, including the popular Abba Said, and has authored 14 books, along with over 15,000 articles, essays, and short stories. His influence extends internationally, having worked in top editorial positions across Nigeria, Britain, America, and Canada. So, like his biographer, Ediayo Oju, describes him. He said he has a ears for poetry, nose for prose, and his mouth draws drama. And I hope his heart is at the heart of the Yoruba homeland issues. You are welcome, sir. Karaoli, sir.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you. Just give me a second. I think I should have adjusted my light. It's okay. I forgot to do that, but it's okay. So I can welcome our listeners from all over the world. It's a very interesting topic we are going to discuss today, and just give you a brief historical background. The Yoruba Igbo political history, and the organizers are asking how we can build trust through accurate perspectives. The political history of Nigeria is deeply intertwined with ethnic identities, and the interactions between the Yoruba and Igbo communities have played a significant role in shaping the country's trajectory. You see, we are discussing Igbo and Yoruba. We have to situate them within Nigerian context, and therefore the history cannot be divorced from the history of Nigeria itself. The Igbo and Yoruba are two of the largest and most prominent nations yoked together by force of arms in the geographical space called Nigeria. The political relationship between the Yoruba and the Igbo has been complex and tumultuous, characterized by periods of coexistence, trade, and cultural exchange, as well as tension, localized violence, and rivalry. This conflict can be traced back to several historical events, beginning with the arrival of European colonial powers in the late 19th century and continuing through Nigeria's struggle for independence and its subsequent political landscape called Nigeria. The country called Nigeria, for lack of a better word, is an expanse of land which deceptively calls itself Nigeria, or Christian Nigeria by those whose economic purpose it has served and continues to serve in the last 300 years or so. It wished it became a nation, that is Nigeria, wished it became a nation, but all the actions, activities, and pronouncements and shenanigans of its political rulers have made that dream a tall order and now almost impossible. That is becoming a nation. The Yoruba, unfortunately, had been caught in this web. The Igbo, on the other hand, whose leadership had been vehemently opposed to the inclusion in various constitutional drafts of right to secession, became vociferous in seeking secession after it had allegedly failed in dominating the country. The Yoruba and Igbo had been existing as distinct ethnic groups with their own cultures and political systems before the arrival of European colonial powers in the late 19th century. However, when the British arrived in the region, they brought with them a new political order that will ultimately lend to the creation of Nigeria as a single entity. It should be noted from the onset that the Yoruba are distinctively different people from the Igbo in several ways, culturally and traditionally, while their worldview is significantly different from each other's. The Yoruba had always believed in communalism as opposed to individualized republicanism. The Yoruba have an urbanized and cosmopolitan way of life, a sociology that believes in interdependence of individuals in a given community. The Yoruba tradition of urban life gives them a unique place, not only among African societies, and we have to emphasize this. The Yoruba had always been urbanized. The Yoruba had an index, I have to note it, the urbanization index of Yoruba is 39.3, which exceeded, that is bigger than that of Canada, with only 34.3, bigger than that of France, which is 31.2, Greece, which is 25.2, and even Poland, which is 17.4. The Yoruba are the most urbanized of all African peoples, and their urban way of life is traditional, dating back to well before the period of European penetration. I'm quoting William Bascom, who emphasizes that Yoruba had always been urbanized and much better urbanized than France, Poland, Canada, and several European countries. And this urbanization had existed long before the European people came to Nigeria. The urbanization resulted in the subsequent growth of large cities, large markets, and thriving prosperity, which attracted envy and jealousy from other ethnic nationalities, including the Igbo leadership in Nigeria. You will recall that in 1952 census, out of the 13 largest towns in Nigeria or population, Yoruba alone had almost 8. Meanwhile, this great feature of the Yoruba is commanding an impressive civilization, as evidenced by in their pioneering educational standards, their buildings, their dresses, and vibrant social engagement, attracted the influx of other nationalities to Yoruba land. Historically misconstrued as an offshoot of European colonization-induced discord, the Yoruba-Igbo political conflict possesses deeper roots in socio-political transformations within the pre-colonial West Africa. To perceive a nuanced account, one must journey through the evolution of both ethno-linguistic groups, sociological, socio-political landscapes, as well as their intermittent interactions from the 13th in contemporary times without subjugating either under an apologetic Western lens. In the early medieval era, around 1300s, both Yoruba and Igbo societies flourished as autonomous entities, albeit with distinct political cultures, structures. The former primarily comprised city-states, that Yoruba comprised city-states, each led by an Oba, while the latter was a federation of smaller chiefdoms. Geographical distances and contracting social political systems in all likelihood curbed internecine tensions. A series of events from late 15th century onward, however, began to entangle these societies within the European trade-driven Atlantic world and its accompanying conflicts. The rise of coastal city-states like Abraka in Igbo land and Old Oyo in Yoruba land in the middle 1400s as nodal points for the transatlantic slave trade, while aiding economic prosperity, also ignited skirmishes over territorial expansion and trade supremacy. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and British, vying for hegemony in West Africa, often exacerbated these tensions through alliances with rival factions. The 19th century witnessed the zenith of colonial encroachment as European powers intensified their scramble for African territories. Berlin Conference 84-85. The Yoruba-dominated Niger Company and Igbo-led United African Company (UAC), both established by British traders, inadvertently became proxies in a race to claim land. The resultant imposition of indirect colonial rule through these companies further complicated the political terrain, as each group was assigned under different administrative units: Yoruba, the Niger and Lagos Colony, and Igbo, the Oil Rivers Protectorate, later amalgamated in 1914. Now, while you have Yoruba as Lagos, Niger, and you talk of Igbo, you are talking of Oil Rivers Protectorate. At that time, they were not dealing with Igbo as a distinct nationality. That the Oil Rivers Protectorate consisted of Ogoja area, the present-day rivers, and so on and so forth, and Delta, not just the Igbo. As the colonial administration took hold in Nigeria through the amalgamation of 1914, the new political landscape compelled diverse ethnicities, including the Yoruba and Igbo, to negotiate their identities, interests, and power dynamics within a novel system of centralized governance. The ensuing socio-economic disparities and inequitable representation in the colonial bureaucracy exacerbated pre-existing tensions, though it is crucial to stress that the primary source of discontent lay in colonial policies rather than intrinsic ethnic animosity. However, it would be misleading to depict this period as a continuous spiral of intergroup conflict, for there were also instances of solidarity, that is, between the Igbo and Yoruba, evident in the formation of Pan-African nationalist movements which cut across ethnic lines in their pursuit of self-determination. The National Council of Nigeria and Cameroons, founded by our own Abat Macaulay, for example, a prominent political organization during the 1940s, and with the Action Group in the 50s, amassed a multi-ethnic membership base, including Yoruba and Igbo, who coalesced around shared objectives. In summary, While historical events bred sporadic political tensions between the Yoruba and Igbo ethnic groups in colonial Nigeria, these frictions largely stemmed from external colonial policies rather than inherent animosity. The intricate tapestry of interactions from the misguided British treaties to the ensuring colonial administration's mismanagement of diversity necessitates nuanced understanding to avoid misconstruing complex histories. This account emphasizes dispassionately on historical chronicles and their implications, eschewing any apologetic undertones for Western nations' actions in the context. Specifically, the political rivalry between the Yoruba and Igbo ethnic nations revolved around their undisputed leaders. And that is the point that we are going to refer to at every point in this discussion. This political rivalry between the Yoruba and Igbo ethnic nations revolved around their undisputed leaders, Obafemi Awolowo and Nnamdi Azikiwe. It began with the return of Nnamdi Azikiwe, from the Gold Coast. His return engendered an Igbo educational awareness that soon challenged the Yoruba domination of the economic and political life of the country. Before Sikh's return, Yoruba dominated the political and economic and political life of the country, leaving in its wake the carcass of the once vibrant Nigerian youth movement. The brief thaw manifested in the formation of the National Council of Nigeria and Cameroons evaporated with the death of Abad Macaulay, the Israel president of the party, in which Nnamdi Azikiwe was the general secretary. Nnamdi Azikiwe and the SNC did not take kindly to the formation of the Egbe Omoduduwa and subsequently the action group by Chief Obafemi Awolowo and his colleagues. If anything, the general elections of 1951, that's another point that we have to note during our discussion. If anything, the general election of 1951-1952 into the central legislative exacerbated the rivalry, rendering impossible hopes of coalition governments by the NCNC and AG after the federal elections of 1959 and 1964. And in the process, allowed the Northern People's Congress, NPC, to dictate the direction, pace, and character of Nigeria's political development, a trend that not even the military interventions and the Civil War were able to alter. This paper attempts to deepen our understanding of this rivalry and concludes that bitter rivalry worked to the utter disadvantages of the two ethnic nations and the Nigerian nation state. The defeat of Nnamdi Azikiwe, that's another point we have to note, has been a major root in the conflict between the Igbo and Yoruba, and which has lasted till today. The defeat of Nnamdi Azikiwe, the symbol of Igbo renaissance and aspirations in the Western regional election of 1951, had significant implications for his role in Nigerian politics going forward. The defeat weakened his political influence and reduced his ability to assert his authority within the NCNC party and the broader political landscape. The loss in the election signaled a decline in his popularity and support base in Western region. The defeat also fostered internal divisions within the NCNC party, as party members and supporters questioned Azikiwe's leadership and electoral strategies. This led to power struggles and challenges to his leadership within the party. Overall, the defeat in Western regional election likely had a lasting impact on Azikiwe's role in Nigerian politics and his position on national political stage, requiring him to navigate challenges reassess his political standing, and potentially adjust his approach to remain a relevant figure in the country's political landscape. That landmark defeat created a wound and bitterness in his heart, which he nursed throughout his lifetime, and which, by extension, poisoned his followers' attitude to the Yoruba and significantly to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the undisputed symbol of Yoruba leadership and their aspirations. There's need at this juncture to clarify a notoriously misleading propaganda which gained currency, especially in the 1950s and 60s, that Chief Awolowo introduced tribalism into Nigerian politics, stemming from the founding of the Egbe Oduduwa. We have to note that the Egbe Oduduwa is a Nigerian sociopolitical organization established in 1945 by Yoruba leaders in London. Its initial purpose was to unite the Yoruba people in a manner similar to the tenets of the Ibibio State Union and Igbo Federal Union. These were unions that had been founded before Egbe Oduduwa, the Igbo Federal Union and the Ibibio Union. The founding members included Adiyemo Lakija, Yakini Ojikutu, who was vice president, Obafemi Awolowo was secretary, Akinola Maja, Oni Akerele, Akintola Williams, Saburi Biobaku, Abiodun Akerele, DOA Oguntoye, Ayo Roshiji, and others. Their aim was to unite the Yoruba people, drawing inspirations. Egbe Oduduwa gained prominence when it was officially launched in Lagos. Key Yoruba politicians associated with the Nigerian youth movement, such as Chief Bode Thomas, Chief H.A. Dobis, Sir Kofa Bayomi, Chief Akintola Williams, Dr. Akinola Maja, played pivotal roles. This revival during a period of intense debates about Nigeria's political direction, nationalism versus parochialism. Whereas we have to note that whereas the Igbo Union was founded in 1927, the Ibibio Union was founded in 1927, and the Igbo Federal Union, which was later renamed Igbo State Union, was 1948, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe. Emerged as an umbrella pan-ethnic organization among the Igbo people. So if you had ethnic nationality unions like Ibibio Union and the Igbo State Union before Egbe Oduduwa was founded, who would then say that it was Egbe Oduduwa, a Yoruba ethnic nationality platform, created the tribal politics in Nigeria. The Igbo Federal Union played a crucial role in shaping Igbo identity and fostering a sense of ethnic pride. It laid the groundwork for future political movements and organizations that will continue to advocate for Igbo nationalism and emancipation. It must be emphasized, however, that the Yoruba man, and the ordinary Igbo man do not nurse any animosity against each other. The ordinary Yoruba man and the ordinary Igbo man do not nurse any animosity against each other. There's a huge list of verifiable evidences to confirm the fact that the Yoruba have always been accommodating to the Igbo. The Yoruba never, at any time in history, attacked the Igbo or Igbo businesses. Yoruba land has always been made available to the Igbo and other ethnic nationalities to do business and prosper. In that context, understanding the complexities of Yoruba-Igbo relations is essential for fostering unity and overcoming historical divisions. During the unfortunate and avoidable Biafra-Nigerian war, for example, the Igbo were given safe haven in Yoruba land. And after the war, all their properties left behind in Yoruba land were handed over to them. And even those that were rented out on their behalf, the rents collected throughout the period were given to them. Like the one late Shubovim Balogun handed over to Ekweme after the war, the rents he collected for him in Lagos. During the aftermath of the terrible political crisis in Western region, Awolow's Action Group reached out to the Igbo political leaders under Premier Michael Okpara and forged alliance named United Progressive Grand Alliance, OPGA. This was a brilliant move by the matriarch of our dynasty, H.I. Awolowo, to reach out to the Igbos during the time my husband was incarcerated, and they formed OPGA. If anything, Igbo leadership is to be blamed for the so-called rivalry and distrust. At the end of the day, it was the Igbo leadership in OPGA that betrayed Action Group. And on two major occasions, when an alliance between Yoruba leadership and Igbo leadership seemed imminent, it was the great Zik that sadly betrayed Awu by deceiving Awu and secretly forging alliance with Ahmadu Bello, Northern People's Congress, NPC, and on the second occasion with Shagari's National Party of Nigeria, NPN. It is unfortunate that the recent national elections threw up the worst sentiments in the Yoruba and Igbo nations when the Igbo became a criminalized species, and it almost became a sin to be married to an Igbo or to have a product of Igbo and Yoruba marriage contesting for political position. It is unfortunate. And I repeat that. It's unfortunate that then during the recent national elections, it threw up the worst sentiments in the Yoruba and Igbo nations when the Igbo became a criminalized species, and it almost became a sin to be married to an Igbo or to have a product of Igbo and Yoruba marriage contesting position. In a widely circulated publication, here I'm going to end this brief intro. I'm quoting a widely circulated publication published yesterday, just yesterday, May 24, by a highly respected Igbo intellectual and scholar, Dr. Nwango Nwazegwe, PhD, DD, who wondered why up to now the Igbo race have not learned their lessons and queried the race for not knowing who their friends are. He actually had Yoruba in mind as the true friends of his people. Please permit me to quote him copiously, and I'm quoting Nwaku here. We have heard M.K. Abiola, who even outclassed all politicians in Nigeria in the business of multi-ethnic marriages and children for political selfishness, and it came to naught. Nwaku says, we have heard Mazi Nwachuku of Izukwelto, who married the daughter of Alhaji Usman Dagogo, the Emir of Katsina, that produced the now retired Major General Ike Nwachukwu. Yet, when the chiefs were down, that did not stop the pogrom against the Igbo in Katsina Emirate in 1966. All they did was to protect the product of their union. I'll quote him further. He says, similarly, Okogu of Asaba, he married a woman from Bauchi Emirate, the product of which was the late First Lady Mariam Rosemary Ibrahim Babangida. The invading federal troops did not spare Mr. Okogu because he was their in-law during the brutal Asaba massacre. At the end of the day, the fatherless Rosemary and his brother Sunday Okogu were taken away with their mother to the safe zone of northern Nigeria and subsequently married out to one of her mother's members. I quote further, among the Igbo, from Nnamdi Azikiwe in the First Republic through Kenneth Mbadiwe, Michael Okpara, Dennis Osadebe, Alex Ekweme, Chuba Okadigbo, to Dim Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu during the Second Republic, to Orji Uzokalu, Rochas Okorocha, Dave Umahi, Hope Uzodimma, Arthur Eze, Charles Soludo, Uche Ekunife, Nne Uwobudu, George Obiozo, Ifeanyi Umahi, Ifeanyi Okowa, Godwin Mefele, Nedu Nwoko, Emmanuel Nwayawu, and now Peter B. in the current political dispensation. The experiences have been tales of the children of Israel choosing to either serve the Philistines, or play Judas Iscariot against the collective interests of their people and their unborn generations. Finally, he says, in all the cases, it was always ended with the ignominious, bitter experience of use and dump. And the reason is that under normal political circumstances, no Fulani man, the harbinger of Islam and ordained caliphate of Allah, will ever work for an Igbo, an ardent Christian and traditional Democrat, to become the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He says, I don't think our Igbo leaders fully understand with their shallow political mentality and decrepit sense of history the depth of this ideological and religious chasm separating the Igbo and If and Fulani. Do they think this deep political gulf can just be covered by mere word of mouth? That's an Igbo man speaking authoritatively that the Yoruba are and should be the preferred friends of the Igbo people. In conclusion, understanding the complexities of Yoruba-Igbo relations is essential for fostering unity and overcoming historical divisions. The way forward is for the Yoruba and Igbo and other indigenous nationalities to come together to confront existential challenges choking them out of life. Excuse me. It does not matter how long the current unworkable Lugadian contraction called Nigeria is sustained by force of arms and political shenanigans of the self-serving mercenary politicians, the so-called Nigeria will collapse. And it is in the interest of all the indigenous nations to come together and free themselves from the yoke on their necks. Yoruba and Igbo must work assiduously for their sovereignties. It is not negotiable. What Yoruba and Igbo need is trust, trust, trust in one another. There are so many good people among the Igbo, likewise the Yoruba. What
I think we lost him.
Hello?
Yeah, welcome back, sir.
Hello?
We lost you for a while, so you can
Hello?
continue. Hello, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay. I was just on the
Yes,
last paragraph.
yes. So you can continue now, sir.
I said what the Yoruba and Igbo need is trust in one another. Yes, I said what Yoruba and Igbo need is trust in one another. There are so many good people among the Igbo, likewise the Yoruba, while all human beings harbor the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, I'm sure the organizers will throw the floor open, and I have a postscript here. I know that Yorubas are alarmed that their shops are being taken over and all that, their landed properties taken over, and so on and so forth. So I think it will be question time that this postscript will be addressed. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very insightful presentation, and it just summarized decades of history in a nutshell. Okay. A number of questions are here that I would like to that I would like you to help us address. And taking it from the last paragraph where you said that what we need is trust. There's a particular sentence you made that the Yoruba Igbo political history has been to the disadvantage of the two ethnic nationalities, and by extension, Nigeria as a country itself. Okay, so in essence, nobody has been a beneficiary of these ethno-political tensions. But you concluded by saying that what we need is trust. How do we begin to build that trust? Who will make the first move, or who should make the first move, or what should be the approach? So what we've seen over years is that this ethnic tension arises at every election junction. So we've had what you call the worst sentiment during the 2023 election. Maybe the one we will have in 2027 will even be worse than what we had in 2023. So it comes around at every election cycle. So meaning that this ethno-political tension is built around electoral supremacy or something like that. So how do we begin to diffuse this mistrust and build trust as we approach another election?
First and foremost, I think my friends in Igbo land have to be properly advised as to recognize who their friends are and who their enemies are. Even when we are talking of election and no election, as far back as during the national youth movement, when elections came up in the late 40s, Chief Obafemi Awolowo voted against his own friend and brother, Akisoya, a Remo man who later became the Odem of Ishara, in preference to Ernest Sese Ikoli, who was not a Yoruba man. So the thing is, I don't know who will do it, but some leaders of Yoruba had always made attempt to, they call it handshake across the Niger, and so on and so forth. Disappointingly, even with all that handshake across the Niger, Nwanyawu in 2023, was it 20 or early this year, said the Yoruba politicians are rascals. I mean, the statements coming from Igbo leadership tend to negate all efforts to bridge the gap and create a working environment, a emotional environment. And it keeps, I mean, people keep telling the Igbo friends that they must know who their friends are. I kept arguing with one of my colleagues in the Nigerian National Columnist League. I said, what happened to the Igbo in Kano and the Katsina in 1966? If it had happened to Yoruba race, there'd be no Yoruba person going back to the north to do any business. So what is it in the character of people that they will not recognize who their friends are? And at every turn, it has always been during the election where we believe that Yoruba and Igbo should work together to strengthen their bond and give better government, better administration to Nigeria, that they will always, betray trust. To answer your question, I think it is education of some sort that will make it happen. Because Yoruba would say Otisumi, because everything has been done to make sure that recognize that we are not the enemies and that we should work together. I mean, without being modest, at a very personal level, the first street named after an Igbo was one I gave to Nzegu when I had my house in Ring Road in 1976. I named the street Chukman Nzegu Crescent, against all the odds and opposition. But I don't think you will find even Abafemi Road in Port Harcourt or in Enugu. It won't happen. So I don't know. Maybe it's left to the younger generation to handle this very peculiar question, how we can create this trust. How much trust from Yoruba end? How much trust do you want them to create? You are not around. You went away during the war. The Yoruba collected rents for you, and so on and so forth. Until Leore was attacked, Yoruba didn't really lend any support to the Biafran war. So what I'm saying is that I think the Yoruba had done everything possible. Because in 1959, after the elections, Chief Obafemi Awolowo went to Zik and said, look, I don't mind even being your finance minister. You be prime minister. And yet he betrayed it and went to negotiate with Ahmadu Bello. So I don't know who will create this trust. Like I said, one part has already given every indication of trust. You allow Igbos in your land, you allow them to trade, you allow them to buy houses, you allow them to live next door, you have them as tenants and so on. So how much trust do you want to give? How much trust do you want to demonstrate to the other party? That we are your friend, we are with you, you are welcome in our home. Maybe the other Jogons may have answers to your question.
Okay, now I'll take it from there, sir. Earlier, when you were describing the Nigerian situation, you said the ethnic nationalities are yoked together by force of arms. And you also made a statement now that perhaps it will get to a point where Yoruba will say Otisumi. Are we getting to that point where we need to redefine our political destiny as a people with or without relationship with the Igbo nationality?
The question is not whether we have got to that stage. I think we have passed that stage. I mean, as far back as 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Saraki, who is obviously a Yoruba person, I mean Saraki Sino, advocated for confederalism. Olabisi Onabanjo, bless his soul, in October 1983, also canvassed for confederation. The same thing with respected intellectual giant Bolaigi. I'm talking of 40, 50 years ago. So it's not today that the Yoruba had realized that this thing is not working. And that, I don't know, somebody, the paper yesterday or the day before that, you have three people, I think it was Dr. Lasisi, you have three people in a race, two have their legs shackled, then the only person who wants to run also is pulling the two down, So yeah, I'm sure you are aware of all the agitations for Yoruba nation in the last Yoruba nation state in the last 10 years or so.
Yes.
And it hasn't stopped. The fact that they're not shouting and they're not talking doesn't mean it has stopped. They're just doing what Bolagi called the sit down look. The agitators are there in the trenches, because we believe, those of us who are associated with this agitation, that Nigeria is not working and it can never work. It will never work in this structure. It's not possible. There's no country in the world that is screwed against common sense that can survive. Nigeria has its head on the ground with their feet, with legs up. The country is upside down.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with anybody. I mean, because we always make it has nothing to do with who is president or who is prime minister. No, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with Nigeria as a space.
There's one area I would like you to help us clarify, which is always, I mean, I've had these discussions with Igbo people, and you could see the generational bitterness, and I'm using the word generational purpose because these people were not even there, they were not even a witness to the civil war. But this bitterness appears to have been transferred, from one generation to another. It was, the role that they believe Chief Obafemi Awolowo played during the Civil War, particularly regarding the 20 pounds policy and also the feeding policy.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Hello, sir. I'm hearing you, sir.
You're asking me a question, you want me to comment on it?
Yes, sir.
Are you asking a question, you're asking me to comment or what?
Yes, to comment on it.
Well, the issue of civil war has been serious. The issue of civil war, the issue of civil war and our role in it has been so misunderstood, I don't know. Chief Obafemi Awolowo was not the president of the country, was not the head of state. He was not the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He was finance minister and vice president of the vice chairman of the federal executive. Chief Obafemi Awolowo did not create policies. He did not execute policies. And the 20 pounds, whatever, is a common price all over the world. In fact, in some countries, after such a war, nothing is given to whoever is considered as losers in the war. The starvation couldn't have been Awolowo's idea of starving anybody. They found that most of the foods and other things sent to the war victims were being consumed by the leaders rather than the citizenry. And therefore, they thought, well, if the foods being sent are not being used for those who they're meant to be used for, then maybe we'll try something else. But that could not be that cannot be blamed on Awo as a person or as an official in the government. What Awo did, actually, Awolowo tried as much as possible to prevent the war. Don't let us fight. Don't do it, because at this point in time we are not prepared for it. Like Western region didn't have any military presence as such, and so Western region was not in position to go into war. And that was the message that Awolowo gave to Ojukwu, who, after all said and done, came back and joined the very people who were killing his people, joined the NPN.
Okay.
In the second under Shagari.
Yeah.
If you are blaming Awolowo, what stones will you throw at Ojukwu, who came back and joined the very forces that almost wiped out his people? I think they should stop that campaign. It's unfortunate.
There's a question about the late Chinua Achebe. And I think apart from the personality of Chief Obafemi Awolowo and the great Zik, the personality of Professor Wole Soyinka and Chinua Achebe is another junction where this ethnic uh, uh, distrust manifests itself. And Professor Chinua Achebe in his book wrote about, I mean, pointedly more like accusing Yoruba of betrayal, particularly when he was talking about his own role, during the Civil War. Now, the book is out there. It is believed by a lot of people, particularly people of Igbo extraction and all of that. Now, how do we begin to change the narrative and change the narrative and exert our influence?
I think I've answered that question. I don't know. The Yorubas say, "Ẹni tó sùn ló ń jí, kì í ṣe ẹni tó díbọ́n." I mean, I don't know how you can change somebody whose mind is already made up. I mean, when I got married, I went to the east for my honeymoon. I went to Enugu, and I spent 2 nights with Achebe in his official residence at Nsukka University, and we discussed. I'm talking of 1972, after the war. I went to Okpanam to see Zegu's mother. So I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know. I mean, okay. Achebe wrote the book. He's dead. How do you change what the content of his book? And how do you stop those who want to believe in what he wrote, believe in it? I don't know. I mean, if somebody wrote in his book that the sky is red instead of blue, and then it's gone, and those who are reading the book believe that sky is red because they are scholar or literary giant has said so, and they still cannot see that sky is not red, then how do you stop it? How do you change it? How do you change the mindset? How else will Yoruba change the mindset other than accommodating people, accommodating? And yet, without coming together, it's not going to augur well for both nationalities.
I think that's exactly the point. Now, having said that, it's not going to augur well for the two nationalities. Are we being mistaken to say that none of us is actually benefiting from this ethnic rivalry, that we are both at losing end?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because to exit from Nigeria contraption would not be as easy for one nationality as it will be if about 4 or 5 nationalities take decision jointly. In other words, the BBO Federation declared they wanted their sovereignty sometime last week or so. The Hausawa people are calling for the same. Hello? Are you with me?
Yes, sir. I'm
because
with you, sir.
My phone is already showing some depression. Okay. Sorry. So it's not helping us by hello?
I'm with you, sir.
Hello? Okay. So that is when I say it will not go well, but it will affect us because, to some extent, because to go away or to exit Nigeria would not be as easy for one person as it would have been if 10 persons say so. But having said so, the Yoruba will not have to wait for anybody when it is right for them to leave. And events have actually shown the way. And given the wisdom of the Yoruba people and their intellectual sophistication, I believe that when they will exit this contraption,
Hello, sir. I think we have a bit of network challenge from his end. Let's hope he comes back. Hello, sir.
I'm hearing you. Maybe what you could do, you can ask somebody to send a text, a message to me on WhatsApp. That will then transfer this to my laptop. Then laptop will not give the same issue that the telephone is giving now.
Okay. I think we're actually rounding up. We just have maybe one or two more questions.
Oh, fine.
Yes, sir. Okay. So you said you are going to talk about a postscript, which has to do with the economic tensions among.
Well, I thought people were going to ask because.
Yes, there's a question about that.
I thought people would say, because some Yoruba are very alarmed. They say the Igbo have taken over their shops. They've taken over even some of them say they have taken over their wives and so on. And
there's a question about that now. That's why I'm referring to the postscript.
Yeah, where's the question?
Okay, so the question says that how do we, undo the entitlement mentality of the Igbos because they bought assets in Yoruba land?
Well, if it is a way to handle it, but I think we should give it the sociological perspective, because people are blaming Yoruba, were you asleep when they were buying your land, where they are building shops? No. The truth of the matter has to do with sociology. The Yoruba men had always believed in artisanship and service industries, like light industries, like blacksmithing, wood carving. The Yoruba man does not stay in shops. The Yoruba man doesn't stay in the market. It's the Yoruba women. Even in farming, all farm products were sold, something were sold by their women, by their wives in the markets. The Yoruba would do blacksmithing, goodsmithing, bricklaying, and so on and so forth. We believe in such. The Igbo man is the Igbo man and the Igbo woman that will stay in the same shop together, trading. Yoruba were not doing buy and selling. We thought we have gone beyond that. Since the emergence of the Odutola industries, Yoruba had gone from petty trading to industrialization. So we are at that stage of our civilization. So we left petty trading, buying and selling to women and to Igbos. Everything we didn't attach it. It's because it's when they went into politics and they started making it a political, weaponizing it as a political tool, that Yorubas are alarmed. Otherwise, nobody cared if anybody is selling spare parts or selling motor parts or selling electronics and so on.
Okay.
Because they've been selling for years until they are not able to manage success. So it's not that Yorubas, then the apprenticeship culture is not a Yoruba culture. This you have a shop, and then you bring about 20 people from your village to understudy you. It's not a Yoruba thing. When you learn barbing or you learn sewing from Yoruba person, you have your freedom and you go away. So it's a sociological thing. But having said so, then the Yoruba men, all their women were educated and their men were educated. So they didn't believe that, I mean, the men were going to school, and so they didn't believe that men should be selling spare parts. They believed that men should be educated and go out and school and work. But the way out,
yes, sir.
Then because we are urban areas, we have many large cities, it is very conducive to trading. And that's why several people came to Yoruba land to trade, because we have urban centers. We have Ibadan, we have Ikinu, we have large centers all over Yoruba land. The way out is that the Yoruba must form large cooperatives. All our billionaires and millionaires should make it a point of duty to support and create cooperative societies in Yoruba land. Let them have cooperatives that will deal in building materials, that will engage massively in building materials, in electronics, in automobiles, spare parts, in pharmaceuticals, retails, and repairs. If Yoruba men cannot man shops, let their wives and daughters do while they source for the goods and merchandise. In other words, if the man cannot sit in the shop selling spare parts, let him go to China, let him go everywhere, buy them, and let their women man the shops. The Igbo in Yoruba land or elsewhere must learn to treat their landlords with reciprocal respect and humility. They should also learn how to manage success without obnoxious display of wealth. So the way to solve it is for cooperatives in every city and village in Yoruba land. And let them have large pharmaceutical shops, large electronic shops, large spare parts shops, large building materials shops. Once they do that, the game will be up.
Okay. There's a question that came in on my WhatsApp line now, so I can't display it on the screen.
Okay.
I will read it out, sir. It said, don't you think the Igbo elders are deliberately passing down the wrong history to their young ones?
Well, they're doing so, but again, you see, in political times, you really don't know. It's always a mob action and mob reaction. Like I said, even when Nwayawu made this reckless statement, believe you me, it was attacked by a larger number of Igbo than Yoruba people. So it's not, I don't think we should exaggerate it that they are passing down bad bele to their younger ones. There are many Igbo intelligentsia who don't reason the way their elders reason, because they know that their elders are more concerned about political selfish gains than the interests of the Igbo people. And therefore, it won't hold water.
Okay. So
at the end of the day, when Yoruba nation state establishes itself and we have our sovereignty, Igbo who want to remain in Yoruba land or trade in Yoruba land will have to abide by the policies and laws and regulations of the Yoruba country when the time comes. So there's nothing to worry about. The Yoruba nation state will certainly come to land. And once we have our countries, we have our nation state, and we have our country, our nation, as we used to have in those days, then whoever wants to stay in Yoruba land will abide by our laws and regulations.
So would that be all from the postscript? I want to ask, what advice do you have for the young Yoruba people out there who feel every now and then there's always this debate, Igbo versus Yoruba debates on Twitter, and it has crystallized into a number of interactions over time. Okay, so what advice do you have, for the young Yoruba people out there?
The young Yoruba people should be educated about the history of the Yoruba, and they should also know the historical antecedents, and they also take pride in their sociology, in their anthropology, and say that we are decent people. We have kings, we have kingdoms, we have urban centers. We've always been civilized. We didn't live in villages. We didn't live in huts. And once they take that pride, they don't need to bother about what anybody is saying or doing to undermine them. Once you know who you are, then nobody can tell you to the contrary. Once you know who you are. So the Yoruba youth just should know their history, and they should be contented with recognizing and appreciating who they are.
Okay, someone
Nobody can
wants
call you a monkey if you don't accept to be called a monkey.
you quoted from a publication from an Igbo person earlier, Dr. Nwag. Someone wants to know who the author is.
I mentioned his name. I can repeat his name again.
Yes.
You can Google his name. That's the best I can say. He's a renowned author. He's a very pro-Igbo writer, but also believes in nationalities. His name is Nkwanko Nwaz Nwankw, Nkwanko, then NwaezieiGwe. Dr. Nwankwo Nwazege. I think he's based in the Philippines.
Okay. Okay.
He's a regular contributor. He's a regular contributor to the social media.
Yes, I know him. I think I read the number of his.
I think he's an associate professor or something like that.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for giving us your time today, of your precious time. We know a number of we've read a number of your writings out there, but we are interested in you saying it in your own voice, so that we can have it for posterity, for our people. Also, we thank you for granting us this audience, and we appreciate you. We thank you very much, sir. So
thank you very much for inviting me and for giving us listening. And I appreciate all our listeners all over the world for also creating time to tune in.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. On this note, we bring to an end today's edition of Yoruba Historical Conversation. We thank you for joining us. You can always go back to our YouTube channels and our social media accounts to watch these conversations all over again, and make sure you also share them with your loved one, with your friends, and maybe also your foes. Also, okay. We need everybody to come to this understanding that all we want is a better country for all of us. Nobody is benefiting, from these ethnic rivalries. We just need to build trust among ourselves. We need to focus, like Akogun said, on what Nigeria should be and how to make Nigeria better for all of us. I thank you all for joining us. Until next time, I say bye bye.